In this video, you're going to learn everything that you need to know to be able to use and work with Redux Toolkit query inside of React applications alongside Redux and Redux Toolkit. But before we get into that, there's two things that I want to mention. And the first one is that if you enjoy the way that I teach in my videos and you're also serious about learning React, you should definitely check out my course, Project React, which goes way beyond what I teach in this video and really any of my other videos, and really teaches you how to build a big and complex application with React as a total beginner. It's using a custom application, which is a method that I haven't really seen anyone else use. And all of the students that have been on the course so far are loving it and they're much better React developers. And I honestly wish this for you as well. If this sounds interesting to you, the course is called Project React and you're going to be able to find it in the first link in the description. And the second thing is if you want tips and tricks and really cool articles about React delivered to your inbox every single week completely for free, check out my newsletter, Import React. I promise you, you will not regret it. With that being said, we can now begin the video and let's talk about Redux Toolkit query. Alright, so let's begin. So over here in front of us, we have an application, and this is actually the same exact code that I built at the end of my Redux and Redux Toolkit tutorial video that I posted in the past. What we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to take this code, which already has a basic store set up with Redux Toolkit, and we're going to extend it by adding Redux Toolkit query. Now, essentially, the reason why we're doing this is because to use Redux Toolkit query, you actually have to use Redux Toolkit in your project. They're kind of the same thing. We actually don't have to install any new dependencies. The only dependencies that we have to install are Redux and Redux Toolkit, which we already have in this project. So let me quickly go over the code that we have here. Again, if you want a refresher on this code and how we built it, check out my Redux and Redux Toolkit tutorial video. But here, I'm just going to quickly go over everything that we have. So right here, we have an app component, right? We have a counter component. And we built a simple counter functionality using Redux. We have our count here, we're using useSelector, we're using useDispatch, and we have some buttons here to actually increment and decrement the count. Here, the actual store, if we can get it here, where is it? Our actual counter slice, there it is. This is our actual store, our slice that is the counter slice, right? We have some initial state over here, the value is 0, and then we have our counter slice. We're using create slice, which comes directly from Redux Toolkit. We're initializing it with a name, with some initial state, and then we have a couple of reducers here for our functionality, and we also have asynchronous support by this extra reducers over here, which essentially uses this builder, and then we have this increment async function here, which is an asynchronous action that we integrated into our store. Right, so that's what we're currently working with. Now with Redux Toolkit query, it's going to be pretty much very similar because again, it is part of the same library. We're essentially going to be building another slice that is going to be an API slice because we're going to be fetching some data, and we're going to be doing pretty similar things and then also integrating it into our React application to consume the data, to consume the queries and even a mutation inside of any React component. So let's begin. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come here inside of my folders over here, and I'm going to go inside of the state folder, and I'm going to create a new folder over here, and we're going to call this one posts, like this. Inside of here, I'm going to create another slice, and we're going to do the post slice. But here I'm going to call it the post API slice because I want to differentiate that this is specifically an API slice, and this is going to be using the query part of Redux Toolkit. So we're going to do posts API slice .ts like so. And in here, we're going to have to write all of our code that is related to fetching and querying our posts. So just like we did it here in our counter slice, we're going to be using a helper from Redux Toolkit. And in this case, we're going to be using it from Redux Toolkit query. It's not going to be create slice. It is going to be create API. So we're going to come here and we're going to do export const posts API slice equals create API, and here we're going to import this from redux.js/toolkit/query/react. We're doing /react because we are working in a React application, and this is going to make it simpler because now we're explicitly saying import this from the React package of Redux Toolkit query. And then we're going to have to call this because this is a function, and this takes in some options as the initial argument. And here we can provide some options over here. So the first one that we're going to provide is the reducer path, like so. So we're going to do reducer path, and here we're just going to do posts like this. And this is going to be pretty simple. It's pretty similar to the name over here that we defined in our counter slice from basic Redux Toolkit. And essentially what this is going to act as, this is going to be the base name of this actual reducer. And then everything that we do with this reducer is going to be against the posts reducer. And this is also going to show up when we work with the Redux DevTools. Everything that is related to the post API slice is going to be under post / and then whatever action we're doing. And then the next property that we're going to add is the base query. So I'm going to do base query, and this one is required. And this is essentially because we're going to be fetching some data, we actually need to provide a function that is going to act as the base query function that will call each of our endpoints. And then when we define those endpoints, Redux Toolkit query is going to use this base query function, and it's going to call those endpoints with that function and then make everything work exactly as it's supposed to. And for this, we're going to use fetch base query, which we can import directly from Redux Toolkit query /React. This essentially is a very light wrapper on top of fetch, right? Because we're going to be fetching data, we're going to use the fetch function. And this essentially adds some extra functionality that Redux Toolkit needs to be able to do its job. You don't have to use this directly. You can actually create your own custom fetching function. And if you want to do that, check out the documentation. But again, that's optional. That's a little bit more advanced. For the purposes of this video, we're just going to use the default, the one that is provided directly from Redux Toolkit query. And here we're just going to give it here as the first argument an object with one single property, and that is going to be the base URL, right? This is going to be the actual base URL that all of our queries, all of our endpoints are going to be fetched against. This is useful because you don't want to have to type the URL every single time that you define an endpoint. Usually you just define the path that you want that endpoint to hit, but the base URL is always going to be the same, right? So think, for example, localhost if we're running locally, or your actual production API endpoint if you're running this in production. Now, for this, we actually don't have any real API implemented. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a free public API called jsonplaceholder.typicode.com. This one has a bunch of endpoints that we can hit. It returns some data. And for the purposes of this video, this is going to be sufficient instead of us having to create our own backend, because that is outside the scope of this video. And then after we did this, you're going to see that we still have some errors. We're missing one required property, and that is going to be the endpoints property over here. And this one, similarly to how we did it here in the counter slice where we had extra reducers, this was a function that received a builder that we can then use that builder to add cases. We're going to do something very similar here. We're going to have this be a function like this. It is also going to accept a builder, and this one is going to return this builder, and using this builder, we're going to be able to create endpoints and attach them to this builder. So for example, let's make our first query, our first endpoint, which is going to be to fetch the posts. We're just going to have a very simple query, no arguments just yet. That is just going to fetch the posts from this base URL over here /posts. So what we can do is we can define our query, our endpoint, our actual function to call. So we're going to do get posts. And then here, we're just going to do builder.query, and this is going to be a function that is going to again take one argument. This is going to be an object, and over here we're just going to do query like this, and we're just going to return actually a string. We're going to do here /posts like this. Actually, I just realized even this is incorrect, and I'm leaving this in the video because I just want to show you that this is perfectly fine and this is normal, and this is just part of the normal development process. So what we have to do here, let's just start again. We're going to have to create here an object, and here we're going to define our endpoints. So get posts, and this is going to be, whoops, what happened? This is going to be our endpoint. We're going to do builder.query, and here we're going to have it a function, pass it here an object as the first argument, and here we're going to do query, a function that is going to return here /posts. There we go. We no longer have an error. Now we did it correctly. So let me just go over what we've actually done, because this can be a little bit confusing. As obviously you've seen, I even confused myself. I made a mistake. Essentially what we're doing here is we're defining our endpoints object, which is going to be a collection of all of the endpoints that we want, all of the functions that we can call in our components that are related to our post API slice, right? All of those are using this builder over here, which essentially are going to use this fetch base query with the base URL. And then here, the get posts is going to add a query to the builder, and we're going to fetch /posts on the base URL, right? So this way, we're going to be able to call the get post function, and through the builder, through Redux Toolkit query, it is going to handle everything for us. And the only thing that we need to do is to just call this endpoint ourselves in our component, and everything else is handled. And then as we create more endpoints, we're going to define them here inside of this object over here. We're going to use the same builder. And here, if we wanted to, we can also add arguments to this function, which I'm going to show you later. And then we can build all of our endpoints, again, all related to the posts, all using this base URL over here, and all using the builder to actually get the query to run. Simple, but it works. So now with this, we actually have everything set up to be able to use this in a component in terms of defining our API slice. Now there is one more thing that we have to do, and we actually have to add this to our main store, just like we added our counter slice. So we can come here to our store.ts, and here, as you can see, we have our main store. It's using configure store from Redux.js toolkit, and then we have our reducer object over here with our counter reducer. We just need to do exactly the same thing, but using our post slice API. So what that looks like is we're going to come here right below our counter and we're going to do posts slice API. We're going to import this from /post API slice. And here we're going to do reducer path like this, right? Which is essentially going to be exactly this reducer path over here that we defined. We're using that. And here, this is going to be equal to posts API slice dot reducer like this, which again, we get because we used the create API function directly from Redux Toolkit, right? And now we have this reducer directly inside of our main store to be able to use. And finally, because we are working with Redux Toolkit query, we need to add one additional thing, and that is going to be the middleware. And this is what this looks like. We're going to come here outside of reducer and we're going to do middleware. This is going to be a function that can take in get default middleware like this. And this is going to be a function that returns, I messed up. This is going to be a function that returns. We're going to return get default middleware. And here we're going to call this and we're going to concat. So concatenate our posts API slice dot middleware like this. Now you don't need to really worry about this and what this actually does. This is required for all of the caching functionality and all the benefits that Redux Toolkit Query provides you. You need to have this middleware here. Redux Toolkit Query is going to work behind the scenes automatically, and you don't really need to worry about this. Just put this here exactly like I did, and you're going to be good to go. So now with this, we can now go into any React component, start using this query, start using our post API slice, and start actually fetching some data and seeing the benefits of using Redux Toolkit Query. But before we get into that, I just want to quickly take a moment here to really think about what are we actually doing in this video. Because what we're doing here is something called learning by doing, right? You're learning how to use Redux Toolkit Query and also how to build this entire thing by watching me do it. And then you're going to be able to do it yourself, either in your own repository or by taking this repository, again, link in the description, and actually using it and learning by doing, which is great because that's also what Brilliant, the sponsor of today's video, is also doing. Brilliant is a place where you do exactly that. You learn by doing. You have thousands of interactive lessons in various topics such as math, data analytics, AI, and of course, more importantly for us, programming. Brilliant has a learning platform that is designed to be uniquely effective. Each lesson that you do on there has you solve problems using a hands-on approach that lets you actually play and get a feel for the different concepts, which has been proven to be a method 6 times more effective than watching traditional lecture videos. Plus, all of the content on Brilliant is crafted by an award-winning team of researchers and professionals from places such as MIT, Microsoft, Google, and more. Brilliant helps you build your critical thinking skills through problem solving instead of memorizing. So while you're building real knowledge on specific topics, you're also learning how to become a better thinker. And you can do all of that on Brilliant with literally just a couple of minutes a day. You have fun lessons that you can do on there whenever you have the time. It's literally the opposite of mindless scrolling, and it actually builds a great habit. And if you want some course recommendations, I would recommend checking out Thinking in Code, which follows actually what we're doing in this video and teaches you solid foundations for computer science, which is going to directly help you as a React developer. To try everything that Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/causeandsolutions or click the link in the description. You're also going to get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thank you once again to Brilliant for sponsoring this video, and now let's continue working with Redux Toolkit Query. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to follow the same pattern that we did here with this counter here. I'm going to create a new component that is all about the posts, and we're going to work in that component in isolation because that is just generally a good practice to do. So we're going to come here to our actual Explorer. We're going to go here inside of components, and I'm going to make a new component, call it posts list.tsx like this. And then I'm going to do const posts list. That is going to be a equals a function, and that is going to return nothing for now. We're now going to start integrating our actual Redux Toolkit Query endpoint or slice into this component. So first, let's just return an empty div like this, and we're going to do div like this just to have something that we're returning. Then also we're going to do export default post list. And actually this should not have an S. Let's remove the S. There we go. Post list like this. And now let's put it here directly in our app component. We can do post list, import this from component/post list and call it, and we are good to go. We can start working in this component. So the first thing that we want to do is, of course, we want to call this get post query to actually fetch our data. Now, the way that we do this is we don't actually call this function directly because we can't really access it as part of this API slice. What we have to do is we have to export a custom hook from this API slice that is going to expose to us this function to be able to use in a component as a custom hook. So we're going to come here at the bottom of the file and we're going to do export const, and this is going to be an object. We're going to do use get posts query, and that is going to be equal to posts API slice like this. Now, the reason we're getting this is because we define this here as get posts, right? And then Redux Toolkit query behind the scenes is going to create for us this hook, use get post query. And as you can see here, it changed the name a little bit. It added use and then it added query. This is essentially, first of all, use. So this can be used as a custom hook. That's what this means. If we don't put use here, then we can't use this as a custom hook. And then query to actually signify to us that this is going to be a query that we can actually use in the component. So again, this function here, based on the name of this function, gets converted and automatically created with this function over here. And then we can come back here to our post list component. Where is it? And then we can just do const data, or actually result, or actually query, it's more appropriate, import use get post query, and then import this directly from our actual endpoint. Now we're getting an error here because we have to call this with a argument here. We're going to customize this argument to actually pass some values later on, but for now just put an empty argument, and this is going to be your query. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to destructure this query and turn it into an object because it has properties, and we're going to access the data property here, and I'm going to alias this as posts because this data property over here is actually our posts, the one that we're fetching from our API endpoint / post over here. And then what I can do is I can come here and actually start writing some markup. So for example, we can put UL like this, and inside of here we can do data ? Because this can be undefined initially on the first render while this data is actually being fetched. And then we can do data.map and then post, and then for each post we can just return. And here we're going to do, let's put the index for now just to keep things simple, or actually no, let's just put the post. We're going to do li key, that is going to be post.id. This actually has an ID, so we can just use the ID directly. And then we're going to do post.title like this, and we are going to save. And actually it's not data, it's posts, right? Because I did alias this, and there we go. Now we have an error here because we are working in TypeScript. We're going to fix that in just a moment. Ideally, you want to type all of these endpoints to actually get proper type inference over here. But because now we just haven't typed anything, we get any, and this is going to be an error in TypeScript. If you're working in JavaScript, this is not going to be a problem. And actually with this, we can come back here to our application and we can see our posts directly over here. We have all of these posts, right? This is an unordered list, and we can see all of our posts over here, and they're coming directly from the endpoint. We didn't have to do anything else besides come in here to our post slice and then define our actual post API slice, define our endpoints, and then expose and export this custom hook over here. And then we just consume the custom hook. We use it inside of a component, and we automatically get all of the data, all of the fetches, all of the states possible for this data. We just get them automatically without having us to do anything. That's why you want to use something like Redux Toolkit Query. Because on top of fetching your data, right, which you've seen here, we actually fetch the data and we get it and we can use it. This does a lot of things behind the scenes. We actually get access to a lot more properties over here. For example, is loading, right? This loading. This is going to be, if you can hover over this, this is going to be a value that is representing currently loading for the first time, no data yet. So we can use this in the component to say that, hey, if we're not loading any data yet, right, if we don't have anything, so for example, if is loading like this, we can just return a div that says loading like this, right? So now if you go back here to our component, if I refresh, you're going to see it for a brief millisecond because again, this API is very fast. We're going to see loading here for a brief millisecond. We also have things like is error, for example, right? If there's an error with the request, right, we can use this property. Redux Toolkit Query is going to, behind the scenes, populate this error with the actual error from the API. And we can use this to actually show something in our actual API. So we can do something like if is error over here, and we can do something like error. Like this, right? Now, obviously, this endpoint is not going to return an error for us, so I can't really show this to you. But if it would, you can do it and you can handle the error, right? So you have all of these properties over here. It does the fetching automatically. It automatically caches all of your data in the background, so you don't have to worry about that. It deduplicates a lot of requests, right? And you can just do that through using this custom hook directly, and that's really it. And if you come here to our actual developer console over here and go here to the Redux DevTools and actually just refresh everything, and let's make this slightly bigger so that we can see what is actually going on. You can see here in the Redux Toolkit DevTools, we have a couple of things here that we didn't do ourselves, but that Redux Toolkit Query is doing automatically for us. For example, we have here post/config/middleware registered. That's because we added the custom middleware. Then we have post/execute query pending. This is the pending state of our actual query. Then we have fulfilled, and then we have some internal subscriptions, which again, we're not really concerned with. This is all the stuff that Redux Toolkit Query is doing behind the scenes for you. And this is really great because instead of doing things manually, creating your own loading and error states and tracking all of that and making sure that you don't have race conditions, you can just use this one custom hook that you get over here, use it, and it does everything for you automatically. This is very similar if you've ever used something like React Query in the past. This is pretty much identical. They've essentially modeled their API because they're not using a React Query under the hood. They've modeled React Query's API and integrated it directly within Redux, which makes a lot of sense. So now with this, we actually know how to work with a query in Redux Toolkit. Now what I'm going to show you here is we're first going to fix this type error to show you how to actually fix the types, and then I'm going to show you how to actually pass arguments over here so that you can customize the actual data that you're sending to your API endpoint. So first for the types, what we're going to do, we're going to come here to our SRC, we're going to make a new folder called types, and here we're going to make a new file, call it post.ts, and here we're going to export type post. And we're going to keep things very simple. We're just going to do ID, and that is going to be number, and then title, that is going to be string like this, and that is going to be our type posts. Then we're going to close this, and we're going to go back here to our post API slice, and then here inside of our builder.query, we can actually give it here some types. And first, what we're going to do, the first type is going to be the return value of our actual endpoint of this /post. We can do post, import this from types at post, and then pass this here as an array because this is going to be an array. And then this takes in an optional second argument. And here we're just going to do an object for now, but we're actually going to pass here. Let's do limit number, and then we're going to do offset number as well. Now what we've done is we defined some types on our actual query. We said that the return value of this query is going to be a post, and the arguments that this query is going to receive is going to be an object with limit and then number, and offset and then number. So what we can do here inside of this query function here is we can actually access those. So we can do an object over here, and then we can do limit, and then we can do offset, and now we can use this directly inside of our endpoint. For example, we can do question mark and then limit equals limit, and then we're going to do end offset equals offset like this. Now we can do this because our API here, this JSON placeholder, actually supports limit and offset. So this is going to work. So we can do this, right? But you can have to work with your own API backend and pass the proper values that it actually accepts, right? But this is how you do it. You create the types over here. You define the types of the actual inputs that you're passing to the query, and then you use them here in this query function, and you pass them to this API endpoint, and it's going to fetch the data automatically. And then back to our post component, we can come here and we can do limit. Again, this is going to be properly typed. We can do 5, for example, and then offset, and then we can do 0 because we want the first page. And now if we go back here to our actual endpoint, we can actually close all of this. We're going to see that we still have a lot of posts because I do believe that I've done this incorrectly. It's not limit, it should be underscore limit, I believe, and then underscore offset. Let's save this and let's go back. And now there we go. That was the actual correct way. So again, you have to use the actual parameters that your API expects, right? So we have limit here and we have just 5 posts because that's what we passed to our query inside of this component. If I change this to just 1 over here, then we're just going to return 1 post, right? This works exactly as we expect. Good, we understand, and now we can work with queries inside of Redux Toolkit Query. Now, the last thing that I'm going to show you is also how to do a mutation, because alongside queries to actually get data, you can also have mutations to send data and to update data to your backend. And this works similarly in exactly the same way. So let's do this really quickly. So here, to add a mutation, you just have to create another endpoint. It goes in the same place as your other endpoints over here. And here we can do something like create post. This is going to be a mutation. So we can do builder.mutation this time. And here we're actually going to pass also some arguments. We're going to do post. This is going to be the actual return value of our actual mutation. And then the second argument is going to be, just like our query, the actual arguments that we're going to call this endpoint with. So here I'm just going to do something, some TypeScript, a little bit of magic, if you will. I'm going to do emit post, and then I'm going to do ID over here like this. And now this is going to be our mutation that we can call with an object. Essentially, this emit here is saying that I'm going to call this function, this mutation, with everything that post has except its ID, right? Because when we're creating a post, we don't actually have an ID. The backend is going to have the ID. So we're just going to omit the ID and pass everything else that is related to a post, which in our case is just going to be the title. And now over here, we have this object here that we have to actually pass a property to. So we're going to do query. This is going to be the same. We're regardless of a mutation or a query. And here it's going to be a function. And again, it takes a post. This is going to be the actual argument that it gets called with. And here it's just going to return, this time is going to be an object because we're going to do something here. We're going to do URL, and that is going to be /post over here. Now, what this actually happens, the reason why we're not returning a string here is because we are running a mutation, which means that we also have to pass a method over here, which is going to be of type post like this. Remember, all of this is running through this fetch based query, which is a wrapper around fetch. So if you're using fetch, when you're making a post request, you have to define the method, and that's why we had to return an object over here instead of just a string. For a query, it's simpler, you just return a string, but for a mutation, you return an object. And then we have to pass also the body like this, and we're going to have to pass our post as the body, and that's it. We have no more errors, and now we can also use this create post inside of our components. Of course, to be able to do that, we have to come here at the bottom, and we have to also export use create post. What happened? I sometimes misclick some things on my videos, but that's okay. Use create post mutation, and we also have access to a custom hook that we can call inside of our components. So we can come back here to post list, and over here where we have use get post query, we can also access the mutation. So we can do const, and here I'm going to do an array, and I'm going to split this into two because this returns a tuple with two arguments. The first one is going to be our actual function that we can call. So we're going to do create post mutation, and the second one is going to be some set of similar properties like is error, is loading, to be able to use and also show some UI based on the mutation instead of the query. And then this is all going to be equal to use create post mutation like this. And over here, let's just make an error go away. Let's do is, and then we're going to do loading as well like this. But now we have two is loading. So we're going to do is creating post. We're just going to make an alias like this. So now we have the use create post mutation. We're getting access to the actual function that we can call inside of here, this create post mutation, and we're getting access to some arguments that Redux Toolkit query returns to us, and again, just like in the query example, manages automatically for us. As this mutation is being run, so as we're calling this function, is loading is going to be automatically updated to match the current state of our mutation. We don't have to do it, and again, this is the benefit of using something like Redux Toolkit query. And then the only thing that we have to do is maybe come here, create a button like this, and here just say create post, and actually on click. So we're going to on click like this. We're just going to do handle create. Actually, we're going to define this inline. We're just going to come in here, and we're going to do an inline function, which is going to be const post. We're going to create our own post over here. We can even type this as a post. Actually, let's not type it because we're not going to have an ID. That's fine. So we're going to do here title my new post, and then we're just going to do create post mutation and pass it here our post, and there we go. We have no type errors because the post here, even though we haven't typed it explicitly, it validates the type that this mutation expects. So that's it. And then maybe here, instead of just create post, we can do something like is creating post. We can make question mark, and then we can do creating ... Otherwise we can do exactly create post like this, so we have a visual indication that the mutation is actually going on. And that's it, right? Now I can come back here to the application. We have our create post button. Again, the UI here, it's not meant to be beautiful, it's meant to be functional. That's fine. We can press this button and it's going to say creating for a bit, and then it's going to actually create the post. Now, because we're using the JSON placeholder API, we're not actually mutating any data, so we're not actually changing any of the data to be changed in the database. This is just simulating that, but it's fine because we can open up here the dev tools, right? In the Redux dev tools, where are they? They are right here. And you can see here that we have post, execute mutation, pending, and then fulfilled, right? So in pending, we have mutations. This is our mutation. And then fulfilled, we actually have some status here, status, and then the data that is returned back from the API, right? The API is not going to mutate data. It's just going to return back to you. And we have title, my new post, and then ID 101 to signify to us, to simulate that this has actually been created. And there you go. Now you learn how to actually set up a mutation, how to use the mutation function, how to use the parameters that it gives you to click the mutation function, to call it with some data, and then to use the values that it provides you to automatically update your UI to match the current state of the mutation. You know how to do this with mutation, and you also know how to do this with a query. So now you pretty much know all of the things that you need to get started to working with Redux Toolkit query. What I would recommend that you do now is that you actually take this repository, you're going to find it in the description, and play around with this and try to work and add more things to this, because of course there's going to be more things that you can do that I have not covered in this video. So again, I highly recommend that. You're going to find the repo in the description, play around with it, because that is going to be the best way that you can learn how to work with Redux Toolkit query. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos just like this one, make sure to leave this video a big thumbs up. You can also click here to subscribe, or you can click here to watch a different video of mine that YouTube seems to think that you're really going to enjoy. And with that being said, my name has been Darius Kozden. This is Kozden Solutions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.